If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this. Night shift workers, what's the creepiest thing that's ever happened during your shift? When I was shutting down projectors and closing down the movie theater around 2 a.m. I shut off the one projector and turn around to see one theater starting to play Insidious from the beginning without previews. It was extremely out of place considering the projectors are programmed for the movies to start automatically with the 20-minute previews built in. No show was scheduled in the computer and I still don't know how it started. But I locked myself in the office for the rest of the night. The night janitors had even scary mishaps. Was sitting at a desk in front of a good-sized window, reading a binder. Sort of had that feeling like someone was watching me, so I looked up and there was a face pressed to the glass. No idea how long he was there before I looked up. Ran out to the foyer where there is a glass door on the porch that should be locked. It wasn't. He started shaking the door trying to get in. Ran to the next room and he just followed me around the house while I was on the phone with the cops, watching me through the windows. They didn't catch him that night. He came back the next night. They caught him. Creepy. Wild animals. I work security 2200-0600 in Deep South Mississippi. One night I'm driving along inside our plant's perimeter fence and I'm passing by our scrapyard when I see a piece of scrap in the middle of the road. I, not wanting to lose a tire, go to pick it up and throw it back in the pile and it opens its eyes and looks at me. I squealed like a prepubescent boy and ran back to my truck to turn the lights on it and take a picture. That was definitely the most shocking, but I had some dangerous run-ins with wild hogs. Got bluff charged by a male that was, at the very least, 200 pounds as tusks on him the size of my hand. I call him Pumbaa, we have an understanding now, he doesn't fuck with me and I don't shoot him. I would hate to have to kill him, he is majestic. Right out of college I got a job as a nanny for 2 elementary-aged girls. For their anniversary, the parents went on a week-long cruise and I stayed home with the kids. The first few nights, the 8-year-old would come into my room multiple times a night and wake me up. It was obvious she hadn't pre-planned what she was going to give me as a reason for waking me, so she would stumble through an excuse on the spot like I just wanted to make sure we are still going to the park tomorrow, or I think I forgot to brush my teeth and wondered if I should do it now or wait till the morning. I figured she was just missing her parents and feeling out of sorts, so I let it slide at first. But by the 4th or 5th time, knowing I needed sleep to keep up with 2 active kids, I told her that she wasn't to wake me up unless it was an emergency. I get a couple more hours of undisturbed sleep, but wake up with a weird feeling around 5 a.m. I turn over and nearly piss myself. The girl had brought over a chair right next to the bed and is staring down at me. It didn't help that she had long, dark hair and this happened a few months after The Ring came out. Her explanation? I just thought it would be fun to watch you sleep. I didn't wake you. Touché, kiddo. I worked night audit at this semi-swanky hotel next to the airport. One night I get a call from a lady in 204. She says there was arguing, loud banging and crying coming out of 206. Check the computer, no one is checked into that room due to maintenance issues. WTF? Called my supervisor to see what to do. She tells me to call on-site security and follow them up with a key. No thanks. JPEG. But I be the bigger man and go up anyways. As we get off the elevator we can hear the crying, it's loud. My heart starts racing as we near the door, so I hand the key to the security guard. The next 5 minutes seem to happen in slow motion. He opens the door and immediately flicks on the light. Keep in mind 206, we're on the 2nd floor, only door in was by me, and this at like 3 a.m. and there was no one around. As we enter the room the shower is on, steam is coming from under the door. There is only one lamp on in the room, it's super cold, and there's a lady in a red lacy bra, black panties, with super red hair curled up crying in the bed. She was facing away from us. As Frank approached her he asked if everything was okay. She sort of stopped crying and rolled over. When she did, a wave of horror came over me. She was super pale, covered in blood and was just staring behind us. That's when we realized the shower had stopped and the door was open. There was a man about 6'5" and standing in the doorway. As we turned around, cops tased him and arrested him. Turns out he was a rapist who hides in hotel rooms, kidnaps women who stay there and cuts them open. To this day I will never go to a hotel again. My mother was an auditor for a hotel which was graveyard. Creepiest had to be a family coming in to check out a room. A father, a mother, 3 sons, and a daughter. My mother is processing their information and payment and she notices the daughter, around 14, is shying away from her dad. My mother watches him closely and realizes the man is grabbing this poor girl's ass. She asks him politely what he is doing, and the man replies, "Nothing." The woman, the mother, is completely ignoring it, and sons are half asleep. The guy then proceeds to grab his daughter's breasts and asks my mother what she thinks of them. My mother is mortified and she screams at him at this point, "What the fuck is he doing?" And he keeps fondling her breasts. At this point, a guest who had been staying the past week and knew my mother at this point walked out into the lobby and witnessed what was going on and mouths to my mother that he's calling the police. She nods and stalls for time. Cops come, take away the parents and take the kids away. My mother was more than a little disturbed after that. I am a manager at a fast food store, on overnight shifts, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. There is only myself and one person with only the drive-thru open. This particular night, around 3 a.m., we noticed the back door slightly open. So I went to investigate, and as I moved the door this man ran towards me. So I shut the door and started to check the rest of the store. Moments later the drive-thru indicator goes off and we see this person go straight past the windows and out of the lane. Followed by another two. They were all on motorized wheelchairs. They continued to drive around and around my store trying to get in the windows. They eventually sat one person at each drive-thru window, shaking them to try get in. I rang the police and they showed up and told me they couldn't do anything cause the 4 people, 3 in wheelchairs and 1 not, told them they just wanted food, and as no one threatened us we were fine. It was like a bad horror movie. Where the people who seem like they are fine actually end up being psycho killers. During my summers at home in college I worked for a company that owned houses all over town that were group homes. I usually only worked at one house per summer, and had only worked with elderly and or dementia patients. I started my first night shift in a new house, not really knowing what to expect but thinking it would be a relatively quiet night with some old people. This house was out in a very rural area and I walked in and met my 2 coworkers who gave me the basics, which included showing me where the key was for the knife drawer they kept locked at all times and the padded corner where they sent the guy who likes to bang his head on walls. I was mildly alarmed, but the first few hours were uneventful. Come to find out, this home houses very mentally challenged persons of all ages. About 3 a.m., this woman comes out of her room wailing, screaming, crying stark naked. She's very thin, almost evacuated looking, and is screaming and hitting herself in the head and crouching in the floor. We get her calmed down and back in bed. The male coworker tells me that he can't help with her because the reason she had night terror like that is because she was raped by another housemate the year prior. Head-banging guy is woke up by the lady screaming and comes out yelling and goes to his corner to bang his head on the mats. It was all very disturbing. I remember the house lights being dim, and I'll never forget the naked woman, and how thin she was, screaming and crying and pulling on her hair. Her eyes were haunting. It was like a horror movie. I left at the end of my shift, cried in my car and never went back. That was a long night. Worked the night shift at my call center. Due to a scheduling glitch I was by myself in the building from 1 a.m. to 7 a.m., except for security, but they never come onto my floor. Anyways, it's Sunday night, it's completely dead on the phones, so I'm browsing no sleep like the idiot I am. Most of the lights on the floor are off except these 4 lights to allow me to walk to the washroom if needed. I hear a door open. There are 2 doors to enter the floor, one really needs to be oiled. So I instantly STFU and sit there quietly. I peeked around and didn't see anything, just heard walking. Heard the door squeak again and waited about 10 minutes, then slowly walked to the elevator and went down. Saw the security guard sitting at his desk playing WoW. Asked him if he was on my floor, he said no. I asked if the janitors were there, he said nope, just me and him. So I freaked and made him come upstairs. He checked, nothing. Security cameras don't record, they are only used to catch us eating at our desks or on cell phones, so that didn't help. So he told me I was being stupid and left. Few days later, same thing, sitting there reading no sleep, minding my business, fixing all the issues like a boss. Then I hear the same door open again, and this time I hear someone walking, and they turn the corner and walk towards my lighted area. I looked and I saw this tall old guy with a fucking hook for a hand smiling and walking towards me. I immediately ran the fuck out of there, down 10 flights of stairs and into the security guard downstairs. I told him it and it took him a minute and he laughed. He was like, "Oh, that's the new guy who's working nights. I'm moving to a different location in a week." I calmed down and Captain Hook came down and we laughed and I asked him why he didn't round the corner last night and introduce himself. He just started today. All that flooding into my head, trying to figure out where the hell that other guy came from. Asked managers when they came in the morning after, they confirmed he just started. I still don't know who the fuck just creeped into my floor, walked around in the dark and noped out. But I no longer work nights alone. Working night shift at a care home, only 2 people work at night. We get everyone to bed and tidy up, then sit down to watch TV and answer if any of the residents ring the bell. About 2 in the morning, the doorbell rings. This is weird as the home is in the countryside, about 10 miles from the nearest village. We go to investigate, find a man at the front door. He asks if he can use the phone as his car is broken down. He isn't allowed in, but we offer to phone a tow truck for him. He agrees. We go get the phone, and when we come back to the door, he's gone. Weird, but we think maybe he's just gone back to his car or something. We go back to sit down but can see down the corridor that the man is now inside, standing in the TV room. He doesn't see us, so we run and hide. We still have the phone, so call the cops, but they take a while to get to us. About 15 minutes later the cops show up, we let them in and they search the place and calm us down. The man isn't found anywhere, and we call management to send some more staff out to stay with us during the night. Manager arrives, police leave. We're back watching TV and chatting, bit calmer now when we hear the front door open then close. Go to investigate, start calling the cops again. Look out the window to see the man running away down the driveway. He'd been in the home the entire time the cops were there. No idea what he wanted, very glad I don't work there anymore. Night shifts are creepy enough in a care home even without intruders. I used to work a night shift at a hotel. One night I had 2 guests get locked out at the same time. One creepy looking guy drunkenly locked himself out in his boxers and called the police before talking to me. This creepy woman also locked herself out, fully clothed and possibly drunk. The guy came to the desk first and I started making his key card for him. The woman came up and started making sex jokes with him in front of me. They started flirting and started suggesting they should have sex with each other. I quickly finish making sure he is actually who he is and give him his card so he would leave and this really creepy conversation would just stop. I start making the woman's card, she continues to talk about sex, I just kind of half smile and ignore her as the guy goes back to his room on the first floor. The cops then show up from when he called them and I tell them what happened and they go to check on them. As soon as they round the corner, the cop ducks, grabs his gun, and yells, "What do you have in your hand?" I'm so glad it turned out to just be the card I gave him and not his dick like I thought it was going to be. The cops talk to him and then leave. I give the woman her card and she tells me the guy was pretty fucked up and starts to go back to her room. She then does a double take, gives me a knowing look over her glasses, and says at least it wasn't Bob. I have no idea who Bob is, we had no Bob or Robert checked in at the hotel at the time. Life gets weird after 2 a.m. My best friend's dad used to work in a morgue. When my best friend and I were about 7 years old, I slept over at his house. His dad came home at 3 a.m., when he was supposed to be home at 7 a.m. He was absolutely beside himself. He told this story to his wife, my best friend's mom, in the kitchen. We sat at the top of the stairs listening. I'll never forget it. John was doing some paperwork at his desk, and there was a body across the room. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he saw one of the arms flip up into the air, then fall back down. Then, the corpse sat upright in a jerky fashion, and whipped its head toward John, as though it were looking at him. John ran out of the morgue, up the stairs, and out into the parking lot. He was screaming and cursing, trying to chill out. He said this actually happens somewhat commonly, bodies squirm and jump a bit because of muscle contractions and such. But he had never seen anything to this degree. John no longer works in morgues. Working at 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. overnight shift, inventory management. Stalkers come in about 2 a.m. to unload the grocery truck, so we have to move out of their way. One dude came up to me, he happened to be my neighbor, and started a conversation. I'm going along with it, as one does. Until I noticed that his eyes were really red and glazed over and he wouldn't move his eyes away from my chest. Of course that made me feel awkward, so I crossed my arms over myself. He noticed that, and remembered that he had a job to do. So he went to unload the truck. Keep in mind, that during our seemingly friendly conversation, he asked me, "What time do you go to lunch?" My reply, "Same time as you do. We work the same shift." He asks, "What are you doing?" So I answer him with, "Going home and eating." Duh. Anyway, so an hour flew by and my so picked me up for lunch, and we drove home. Coming into our driveway, I saw the dude from work, standing expectantly on his porch. I was hesitant to get out of the car. So I got out, grabbed my so's hand, and we made our way to our door. Before we got inside, the dude started throwing a fit, flailing his arms and legs around, stomping like a child, all that shit. He kicked the door open, kicked a bunch of shit that was by his door, boxes or something, and went inside. where we heard him screaming at his wife and kids about something. I called the cops and they dragged him out. Turns out he was drunk. No clue what his plans were, but he did know that I usually walked home alone. The same path he takes. This is probably not what you were expecting, but here we go. I used to work for a relatively small security company. It was privately owned, had about 30 employees altogether. They'd get a contract with a factory and then basically your job was to sit in that factory for 8 to 12 hours when no one was working in it. So I'd be working by myself, alone, overnight, in a completely empty factory. In my 2 years of doing that job, I never one time saw a single thing I would call supernatural. However, I did see Dennis. One night my captain calls me on my phone and tells me a new trainee will be coming in about 5 a.m. and to show him the ropes, teach him how to make rounds, you walk around the building, that's basically what making a round is, etc. So it's about 4:45 a.m. and I step outside to the parking lot to have a smoke and wait on the new guy. After about 10 minutes a car pulls up, stops, backs up and drives away. I was clearly visible, so I have no idea why he left, but the car passed by about 3 to 4 more times before finally pulling in and shutting off the engine. I can see him in the car and he's just sitting in the driver's seat staring at me. In the back seat are 2 kids probably around 6 to 8. After about 3 minutes of me wondering what is going on, he gets out of the car. Dennis is fucked up looking. He's about 4 feet 10 inches and fatter than damn near anyone I have ever seen. He has a huge rash covering about 70% of his body with a white crust outlining most of it. He then speaks, had a little trouble finding the place. His voice is high-pitched. I mean really high-pitched. I'm talking Judge Doom in the final scene of Who Framed Roger Rabbit high-pitched. Then he extends his hand to shake mine, without thinking much, I shake it, there's 1 finger on it. 1. And the rest of the hand looks like some kind of stumpy flesh mitten. One of the kids gets out of the car, has the same rash, is also very fat, is also missing fingers. He says, "Daddy, can I get a drink?" Dennis turns around and screams in that high-pitched voice, "Get back in the damn car and don't you get out again." I'm in fucking shock. So I take the guy around the factory, show him the perimeter, tell him where emergency stuff is. About a minute into our walk I notice this guy smells like hell. I mean he literally reeks of ball sweat and fresh diarrhea. The whole time he's asking me strange questions, like do you have a crush on anyone that works here? Or can I hunt on this property? He finally leaves after standing in the office trying to make small talk with me for about 15 minutes after the tour. On his way out he said, "We're gonna be good friends. Even if you don't think so now." I went home about 2 hours later and stood in the shower for a good solid hour washing myself, trying to get the image of that guy out of my head. Called my captain and asked him to reassign me someplace else. Never had to see him again. That's been more than 10 years and it still bothers me. I used to work as a bus driver and we had this one stop which we had to wait for 10 minutes to start the next run. So there were never any passengers on the bus. Just me. The problem is this stop was in the grounds of an old, abandoned hospital called Sunnyside, which was creepy as hell at night. It was one of those old Victoriana-style hospitals, so it was right out of the worst horror films. So anyway, one night, feeling brave, I decided to have a wander round and look in some windows. The first window I looked in was to an empty room. Some rubbish on the floor but nothing major. Went to the next window and the room had a lot of medical apparatus in it, including a bed with straps attached to it. Freaked me out a bit until I looked up and could have swore someone was standing at the door of the room, staring at me. He had what looked like dark green scrubs on and moccasin-style shoes. I ducked my head back down, shitting myself. After about a minute of composure, I plucked up the courage to look again and there was nothing there. The creepiest part of it, though, was that the hospital still had power and after seeing him, a corridor a wee bit further down lit up. But not all at once. I could only think it had lights fitted with motion sensors, because one by one, the lights switched themselves on, then switched themselves off again, as if someone was walking down the corridor. I noped the fuck right out of there as fast as I could. Bear in mind, this was about 11 p.m. and it was confirmed to me later by an ex-employee that there were no security guards assigned to the hospital because it had been cleared out. Still creeps me out to this day thinking about it. I bartend at a local dive that is open until 5 a.m. so naturally most of the customers are pretty intoxicated by the time they even get there. It was a slow night so I spent much of the time chatting with a couple different groups of guys. Everything seemed very normal. Suddenly, I heard angry shouting coming from the men's room about 15 feet away from me. I turned around to see a male customer holding a gun to another male customer's head. The two were struggling with one another when a third man ran up to them with a gun as well. The three of them make their way out the front door as the one without a weapon stops fighting. The bouncer is immediately calling 911 while myself and the rest of the customers are in shock. We actually come to find out that the men with guns are off-duty police officers and were very clearly drunk. Apparently, the civilian man had offered the first cop cocaine in the washroom, setting off this chain of events. I'm not sure what charges, if any, the man with the coke faced, but detectives did come in about a week later to question me about the actions of both officers. The last I heard, they were both suspended, and rightfully so. I used to work in one of the booths at a parking ramp for one of the biggest hospitals in the area. The ramp had 2 lanes, and the bathroom was in the secondary booth. They only opened it up during rushes during the day. I worked until 3 a.m. Every time I had to go to the bathroom, I had to go over to the other booth. Also, I drink a lot of coffee and have a small bladder. This is important. One night, a doctor was leaving, and everything seemed normal. She paid, I hit the cash button and the gate opened. She started to drive away and then this happened. Doctor, oh, I was wondering. Do your booths lock? The windows and the doors? Me, yes. Doctor, oh, okay. Because the building right next to the ramp is the psych ward. Sometimes the patients escape, and I wanted to make sure you were safe. Well, good night. And off she drove. I was left to think about this for the last 2 hours of my shift, trying to hold it until my shift was over, and I could go back to the office and pee in safety. When I was 17, I worked at a drive-in fast food place about a mile from where I lived. The store closed at midnight, so I would start walking home usually around 12:30. There were no lights on the street I walked along until I was about 2 to 3 minutes away from my house. I wasn't too scared because my dad had bought me a stun gun and a knife to carry. I was walking home after an uneventful day when a car passed by. The engine was surprisingly quiet when they passed me, so I recognized it when they circled around and started following slowly behind me with their headlights off. As a rule, I never wore headphones so I could hear when someone says something about behind her and music on. Trying to calm down and coax my heart out of my throat, I pulled my stun gun out of my pocket and let it go off loudly for about 3 seconds. The car flashed their high beams and sped off past me. My dad started picking me up after that. We lived near the place where the yogurt shop murders took place in Texas, so he was done taking chances. I was working weekend overnights at my knock, all alone. You'd frequently hear noises in the building, but after a few nights you learn to ignore them. Once night at around 1 a.m. I heard a lot of noise, and it put me a little on edge. Then I got a door force alarm, meaning someone had forced open one of our magnetically locked doors, and freaked the fuck out. I did a quick spot check of our exterior doors, and didn't see anything suspicious. I then noticed on our security cameras that there were people in our generator room walking around. The generator room is in the underground parking garage, which is well below me, but it still caused me to panic. I called my boss immediately, and he told me to call the alarm company to see if there were any other known alerts. When I did, they told me there was an active fire alarm in the building, and let me know that those people were firemen. Of course, the alarm didn't go off on our floor, so I had no idea. When I asked them if there was any immediate danger, they told me that they didn't know my company's policy regarding fire alarms. I ended up leaving the building, and found out that the dry pipe system had primed, but not activated. There are basically empty pipes in the parking garage, and when the alarm goes off they fill with water, and when a fire is detected, they start spraying. The fireman had taken an axe to the metal door that goes into the generator, looking for some sort of fire or smoke. Turns out that the alarm was at fault, but the fireman caused a lot of damage not knowing this. For the next few weeks I was even more on edge whenever I heard a strange noise around the office. It was the early 90s and I was working with a skeleton crew of about 15 people in a bra factory in Georgia on the night shift. I was just 18 years old but had recently got my first loan ever from the credit union, and as an intelligent, dumb teen I purchased a bright red Porsche 944. At night all the lights in the plant would be turned off except for the section I worked in. One night while leaving, I noticed that one of the company trucks outside had left their interior lights on but thought nothing of it. Not my problem. The next morning a duffel bag containing $750K was found in the cab of the truck and a box with 50 kilos of cocaine was found inside the plant. The police promptly came and took possession of the money and drugs. A couple of nights later an overseas trailer was dropped off and it was discovered to have a false wall filled with more cocaine. They decided to leave it as bait but no one came for the pickup. A few days later my friends decided to just up and leave to go live in Florida, and I as a teen was totally down with this awesome plan. So I quit my job and moved with them. Back then I thought nothing of this, but thinking back, I was in a plant at the same time of night. Some heavy drug operations were going down and there could have been a guy in that truck crouched down when I noticed its light on. Had he seen me I would probably have been killed. Then I imagine how I must have appeared to the drug dealers. A dumb teenage kid buys a bright red Porsche, quits his job and moves to Florida, where coke deals go down all the time. All in the couple of days they lost millions in drugs and cash while on my shift. Pretty lucky to be alive. I worked at a night zoo. Place was pretty darn creepy at night, but I have never seen anything. My friend recounted me this story. One night he was at the front desk when a nice lady comes up to him and gushes about how awesome the night zoo is. She goes on about the atmosphere and yada yada when she says, I saw a red monkey that was in a tree with longish hair and it was swinging its legs. Wow, did not expect the zoo to have free-ranging wildlife. This set off a few alarm bells. First, monkeys are not nocturnal animals, that's why we have none in the night zoo. Second, all zoos are quarantined somehow to prevent external wildlife from entering due to diseases. Third, a red monkey with long hair swinging its legs. Come on. I work at a cinema, and at the end of every night, before closing, we have to check the screens are empty, in case someone leaves their phone, or fancies trying to stay in overnight. Can't let you do that, not least because I've been told it gets cold enough to kill, especially in winter. In the cinema I work at, screen number 7 is reportedly haunted. I've always had a funny feeling in that one, even before I heard the stories. Everyone has one, from having Skittles thrown at them after confirming it was empty, to having people whisper in their ear. It was the end of the night, a couple weeks back, and it fell to me to check 7. We're meant to do it in pairs, but my partner for that night was dealing with a customer and the manager wanted everything done 5 minutes ago so we could leave. Screen 7 was dark. So dark. And it was a horror film playing in there, Annabelle I believe. As I began to climb the stairs, during the credits, the music did that horror movie thing where the strings grow in intensity and volume. Oh no. I ran up to the top, empty. Good. And began to run downstairs. And as I got to the bottom, it happened. An orchestra hit. Nothing ethereal or inexplicable. But I shat myself, metaphorically, and got told by my colleague that night that he heard my swearing. While I was in high school I worked for a catering company / banquet hall, so my hours usually started anywhere from 4 to 7 and ended from 11 to 2. So one day I was there pretty late resetting a room for a wedding we were having the next day, and someone had told me to go upstairs and get some chairs from the room that hosted the wedding that night. So when I got the room I noticed that there were still people in the room, chatting it up and having a good time. I was told the wedding ended an hour ago, but I thought nothing of it and got some chairs and brought them down. When I brought the chairs down I told someone that there were still guests there and that if we need anything else from that room we should wait until they leave. The person I told said that he was up in that room just moments ago and didn't remember seeing anyone up there, so I brought him up there and, sure enough, the room was empty, and looked like it had been for hours. Easily the creepiest thing that's ever happened to me. I work the night shift as an EMT in a large city. So one night around 2 a.m. we get a call for a psychiatric problem in one of our more ghetto neighborhoods. Dispatch tells us to stage and wait for police to make contact first. So we're sitting maybe 2 blocks down the street in the ambulance and I'm looking down texting and my partner goes, cervix probe. So I look up and there's this lady walking down the street straight at us. Check the notes on the call, and the girl matches the description. I just say, well, fuck that, and put the truck in drive and go around the corner another block or so. Whatever, weird shit happens, she's probably just walking home. So about a minute later this chick turns the corner and she is walking fast now. Check the call notes again, patient possibly armed, so another fuck this moment and drive onto a street that should have an outlet. Nope, unmarked construction. Well shit. Turn the truck around and this girl is just standing about 20 feet away. I get out and ask her if she's okay. She stares at me and goes, are you here for that crazy lady 3 streets over? Me, maybe if we are talking about the same person. Her, oh, she's fine. Gets dead serious, I'd stay away if I were you. What the f? So she walks back the way she came. We try to keep her in sight for as long as possible, long enough that we could reasonably assume she's the patient. A few minutes later PD gets there and clears us in. We go to the house and there are security cameras everywhere around the house. No one answers the door. I'm checking in windows to see if I see anyone. The house is just off. I can't explain it, but it was just not quite right. Never did make contact with someone we could confirm was the patient. Gave me the chills. I worked the night shift in a greasy spoon diner. Lots of drunks and stuff. So the other waitress gets off at 4 a.m., while I stay until 7 a.m. She leaves only to come back in a few seconds later. She has a weird, half-smiling look on her face. She says, someone put something on your car. Judging by her look, I know it's not good. I run out to find my car covered in naked dolls. Hundreds of them. Cabbage Patch, Barbies, baby dolls, etc. all different kinds, shapes, sizes. The only thing they have in common is they're all naked. It took 4.5 55-gallon trash cans packed to get rid of them all. It was weird. What came next was weirder. I proceeded to get calls at work, nightly, at 4:15 a.m., asking if I liked my gift. The calls started out as polite and inquisitive, and over 2 months turned into yelling and calling me a slut. Then, one day at 4:15 a.m. like always, the phone rings, I answer, I hear a bunch of popping noise, no voices, then they hung up. I never got a call again. It's been 9 years, and I still don't have a clue who or why. I was on a solo patrol of abandoned barracks about 2 to 3 a.m. The duty was to just keep people from squatting in them after one was set on fire by the candles a squatter was using, burning them alive. Anyhow, here I was doing my rounds, flashlight off since there was enough light for me to get around. I hear noise behind me. I turn around to find nothing. Light it up, still nothing. Okay. Turn and continue on. A few steps later I hear footsteps in the dry leaves. Turn and nothing again. I decide to move out of the area. Sounds follow me. The pattern continues. Turn and nothing each time. Fuck this. I decide to go lights out again. Waited a few minutes to get my eyes adjusted again. This time I start to walk backwards. Sure enough, as I start to walk, something darts out of the brush and begins following me. Since I am facing it, I light it up while still taking backward steps. A fox. Cute little fucker almost gave me a heart attack. He would do the same thing every time I did that patrol. Always a few yards behind me and would dart out of view if I stopped. He never said a word, leaving the age-old question unanswered. I just started an overnight cleaning job at a technical college campus. The place was huge, so we'd meet at the boss's office and get assigned a section. I got assigned the arts building, which had a big courtyard in the middle that was filled with sculptures. As I walked through the pitch-dark courtyard looking for the light switch, I tripped on what felt like a hose, and then one of the sculptures lurched forward and attacked me. I shoved him off me and sprinted to switch on the lights, abandoning my cleaning cart. I turned to look at my assailant and pissed myself laughing. He was a mannequin who bore a slight resemblance to Pinhead from the Hellraiser movies. He wore a long black robe with long tentacles poking out of the bottom, one of which I had tripped on, triggering the attack. In the struggle, his head and one of his arms had come off. I stood him back up, reattached his arm and head, and tried to make it look like he hadn't just lost a fight to a cleaner. About 15 years ago, I was the night security at a Circuit City distribution warehouse. It was in the center of a large industrial area, so most of my shift I was alone. I was very tired from working many hours and not enough sleep. The yard with all the trailers with shipments held up to 300 trailers, and the security entrance was in my line of sight, approximately 15 yards, 13.7 meters, away. The company light-duty moving trucks parked in the yard were approximately 75 yards, 68.58 meters, from my post and with their cabs facing away from me. There was no one else on the property. I had glanced at the closest truck when I thought I saw movement in the cab being reflected by the large side mirrors. I told myself that no one was on site and maybe it was shadows from the trees playing tricks with my tired eyes. The more I stared, the more it looked like a guy was sitting in the cab. I could see what looked like a face in the mirror's reflection. Being too scared to just go have a look, I grabbed a piece of paper and a pen and sketched what I could see. As I finished my sketch, I swear, he turned his head and looked directly at me. Now I was getting real scared, but I tried to quickly sketch him from this new angle in case I had to give a description. After staring at me for several minutes, which felt like hours, he turned away again and I drew a third sketch. I didn't move for the next 2 hours, until the yard driver came in to work, and when I opened the gate, I went straight to the truck. I had backup now. There was no one there, of course. I was working as an assistant manager at Domino's Pizza. I was closing up shop as usual and I turned the corner to see someone standing at the window. The man looked astoundingly similar to a man who was a part of a recurring nightmare I have had since I was a kid. Not just a casual scary dream, I'm talking sweating, convulsing, shit to bring up in therapy kind of dream. I completely panicked. Not only because I was completely alone at 1 a.m. as a 22-year-old girl, but he just stood there. He just stood there and looked me right in the eye. I called the driver I was working with to come back and continued to hide in the office crying like a bitch. I'd like to add here that it takes quite a bit for me to cry, or be scared at all. I've been in situations where real panic are necessary and kept pretty damn calm. After roughly 5 minutes of total fetal position cry attack, I built a bit of confidence and walked back to the window. He was still there. I asked him if I could help him, and he said nothing. Just fucking stared at me. Finally the driver came back, I told him where the man was, and when he went to check for him, he was gone. Nothing to this day has ever terrified me more. I never that dream again either. The last bar I worked security at, we'd get out around 2:30 in the morning, with new usually being the last out. This one night I lock up, walk a bartender to get car, then walk to my car, only to then realize I forgot my phone charger in the office, so I walk back to get it. By this time it's like 3 a.m, the street is empty, even the latent drunks and bums have wandered off, and I go back in the bar and walk back to the office using my flashlight because the light switches are at the back. Anyway, I grab my charger, start to head back to the front, and then I hear it. A moan. A deep, howling moan echoing from somewhere in the bar. I immediately freeze, and about a million possibilities flash through my mind about what that could have been, and just when I start to convince myself that it was the AC ducts or something, I hear it again, louder and closer. I freak out, hit the light switch, and see an arm hanging out the bottom of the men's room door. I run over, open the door, and there's a dude laying on the floor just obliterated. He must have somehow passed out in a stall, and whoever checked the bathrooms at the end of the night must have missed him. I ended up helping him sober up enough to call a cab.